Sealed and buried for all time is the key to mankind's future. It will take you a million light years from home, but will it bring you back? Here's your retro look at the Hasbro toys. This is the Stargate Colonel O'Neill figure. Colonel Jack O'Neill was a tough-as-nails military hero committed to his country, until the loss of his son sent him into a tailspin. Labeled unstable by his superiors, he was given a medical discharge and dismissed from service. After 2 years of depression, O'Neill was called back for duty and offered the leadership of a top-secret Stargate program. Because of his nothing-to-lose personality, O'Neill accepted the mission, to which he carries along secret orders unknown to his fellow Stargate team leaders. Before we get a closer look at Colonel O'Neill, the first thing we're going to do is figure out how tall the figure stands. It seems almost like it's been a million years since I had a look at retro figures, something of which I actually kind of miss doing. So I want to rectify that. We're still going to be, of course, looking at the hot new toys coming out in store shelves. Periodically, I think I'd like to peek at some retro toys that would have made toy store shelves, certainly when I was growing up, and maybe other collectors out there, well, around that same age bracket. Nonetheless, though, O'Neill stands 4.2 inches in height. He's generally quite small. He's a little bit taller than a standard G.I. Joe, but he's still pretty small. And that in centimeters works out to be 10.8 centimeters tall. Let's have a look at the accessories that come included with Colonel O'Neill. First things first, you get a collectible Stargate artifact. Small, too small, I think, perhaps, to fit through that and jump across the universe. I suppose if you do have a little small kitty cat, that could probably fit in there. I don't know what you would be dialing up to send a kitty far across the reaches of space, but nonetheless, it is all done in one singular plastic. No additional paint has been added to it. Although all the chevrons are located along the top and around the outer perimeter of the circle, it has pretty good details, keeping in mind, again, the time period in which these figures would have come around, and the fact, again, like these are just geared towards kids. They're smaller in scale, of course, as well. So not too bad for the Stargate artifact. I feel almost compelled to kind of put a chain around that, wear it around my neck, you know, like a little artifact necklace. Why not? I think I could pull that off. So it is something, again, it comes included with the figure. You're probably not even going to do anything with it. It would have certainly been nice if they had actually made a full-scale Stargate. But again, I think at the time period, this line ran at, it seemed like that. It came, it went, it was gone. I don't think they really had much invested interest to do full-out Stargates. Certainly some of the vehicles are pretty cool, though, nonetheless. So he does come included with that. He does also come included with a firing missile. Of course, this is all the things that kids love back in the day, is firing missile weapons. Every line seemed to have it. Either it was that or it was cap firing, little caps that you would put inside, like cops, for example. Now, this is a pretty interesting looking bazooka. This is the bazooka that comes included with the figure. It's sort of held underneath the figure's arms and then fires out that way. At least it doesn't have the risk of firing in his face, because usually bazookas you would put on the top of his head, for example. I guess you could still put it on top. Like if you took the arm, for example, and fed it up here, you could put technically the bazooka up on his shoulders as well. I think it sits rather awkwardly, so actually at the beginning of this review, I displayed it down here. If you do decide for your own imagination, you certainly would like to have Colonel O'Neill having it mounted to his shoulders, you could by all means pull that off if you wanted to. But I kind of like the look of having it displayed under his arm. That's just me. It's my personal preference. He does come with a couple of missiles, 2 to be exact, so if you do lose one, shoots across the room. Under the couch, you'll never find it again. He does come with a second one. It slides into place, and this was certainly back in the day before we were worried of things firing in kids' faces. So this one actually does fire. You have a little firing trigger that's located on the underside of the bazooka, and all you do is just bring the trigger forward, and sure enough, went right across the room. It's a good thing I actually have an extra one. You can put it in, like I said, it only goes really one way. Unlike the Stargate, well, I guess the Stargate technically was sort of a one-way trip, but they ended up eventually coming back. I certainly hope I'm not spoiling that for anybody. So yes, it does have a firing missile. That's pretty cool. I always like the fact that you do come included with that. Again, if you want to display it with it on the underside of his arm, you can do that. You can put it on top of his shoulder as well. It's entirely up to you. It does also come, of course, with military-grade firearms. The firearm that it comes included with, providing, again, I put it in the right position, doesn't actually fit around his hand too well. The hands are in a permanent gripping pose, which seems to always be the case when it comes to old vintage toy lines. But depending on whatever hand you put it in, it still has the same result. Again, if you put it into his hand like so. The hardest part, of course, is the fact that the clip jets out the bottom, sort of causing it to always be in a pointed angle. Unless he's shooting it from this side and this angle, you shouldn't have too much the worries. But again, it's just very difficult to fit it into his hand. He does also have these like noticeable clips or pegs located on the side. I'm perplexed actually what those are actually for. I don't know if they're supposed to clip onto something, but there's nothing really on the figure that would say, yes, you're supposed to clip it right there. Yes, you're supposed to clip it right there. Yes, you're supposed to clip it right there. Okay, you maybe probably wouldn't clip it right there. I feel like this firearm is probably reused from something else. Still, again, I don't know, understanding why these little pegs are located on the side, but to be fair, oh, wait a minute. Let's see if it actually pegs onto the side. I do notice that there's like a couple of holes located on the side of the bazooka, something I actually haven't even considered trying. No, it's about the same size. As you can see, it fits fine in there, but it doesn't stay in place. So I call shenanigans. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with this. Somebody from Hasbro, travel back in time, or if you still currently work at Hasbro. I don't get, again, what these holes are supposed to be for, nor do I understand what these pegs located on the sides are supposed to be for. Maybe they're just more so decoration than anything else. O'Neill also comes included with a beret. And of all the things I've talked about already that seemed the most difficult to hold with the figure, the beret seems the hardest, surprisingly enough. It is made of a not quite softest of rubbers, but it's still pliable if you want to squeeze it in between your digits. And it's supposed to, I say supposed to, fit over top of his head. It just barely fits over his head. Half the time I feel like I'm sort of just resting it on his head. And pray that nobody sneezes in the room and knocks that beret clear off his head. I would not be able to tip it upside down and do the blizzard test, because that beret sure would fall off and fall onto the floor and roll away someplace like where the missile has currently found its place. But like I said, it does fit over top of his head. It almost seems like the beret is not nearly the right size. Thank goodness at least they didn't sacrifice the sculpting on the top of his hair. But I guess the trade-off now for that is he can't properly hold his beret. Like I said, unless I just force it on there, which doesn't really seem to be really going along for it. I might actually even just consider, oh, dare I say the G word, glue. I won't glue that. No matter how frustrated I might get with the beret, you never know, down the road I may decide to want to take the beret off. And I don't want to have to chip and break the glue now that I've already glued it in place, so I'm not going to be dumb like that. Just going to stick it on top of his head. It does look a little silly, doesn't it? Because it doesn't go far enough down, it just doesn't clear quite his head. Like I said, it just looks like it looks like somebody took an image of a figure and tried their best to crop and put over top of an image of something else. And you know that their Photoshop skills aren't the greatest. That's what it looks like. So we're going to go ahead and take the beret off because I know it's going to fall off and I certainly don't want to misplace it anywhere. And let's get a close look at Colonel O'Neill's face. Depending on where you find your fancy for Stargate, whether it be the TV series with Richard Dean Anderson, or if you prefer the Kurt Russell version of Colonel O'Neill from the films, even though I did watch straight through the entire run of Stargate, the series, Stargate Atlantis, and even tried my luck at that side spin-off Stargate, there we go, mixing sci-fi TV series. I prefer personally the Kurt Russell O'Neill. That's just my own personal preference. To be fair, Anderson did do it longer, but I still find the more grizzled kind of... You could really feel at least Colonel O'Neill, at least in the film, was somebody that was down on his odds, had lost so much, and was trying his luck at redemption. As for it goes for face sculpt, Again, you know, it's sort of a vintage toy, so you have to sort of give it a bit of a pass. Does it look like Kurt Russell? It looks close enough like Kurt Russell. It falls within the parameters of what you would normally expect to find with G.I. Joes. Sort of a simplified face sculpt, but it's close enough. The Van Damme, mixing, of course, movies. The Van Damme Street Fighter G.I. Joe I found looked more like him than this looks like Kurt Russell. To be fair, though, this one doesn't fall into also the parameters of G.I. Joe's being superposable. He is very limited. We'll talk about that in a second as well. For his outfit, he is wearing a long black jacket. Looks to be like a silver communication device that's attached to his shoulder. And he does also have some paint done in his belt, primarily this light brown color. The back, you can see the date of which this was released. I believe that says 1994, if I'm not mistaken. 1994 Hasbro, located on the back right there. It's a bit of a standout, and what is not there as well is also the hole located on the back that tends to go with a lot of the G.I. Joes. This one actually doesn't have a backpack. Even if he did, I don't even know whereabouts you would actually put it. Further moving down on the figure, you do have the coloring done in his brown legs. Ironically enough, actually, they didn't paint the in-between crotch area, so it's the same black color as the rest of his jacket. This sort of causes a weird thing because it kind of looks like he's wearing a bodysuit that wraps around. It kind of looks like those old baby outfits. Having a child myself, the little button snaps underneath, so it was easy to change their diapers. A wrong comparison I'm sure to be making for Colonel O'Neill, who has served his country well. I'm comparing him to the little snap-up bodysuits that we give to little children. He's got some pockets located on the side and some military boots. He's a very shiny-looking figure. It's got lots of cool colors, at least in the colors in the sense of being jet black. Their black, for example, doesn't have, like, it's not a very light black, so I feel like the colors are generally quite rich on Colonel O'Neill. It's just, again, a shame that he can't properly hold his beret, at least putting it on his head. I guess you could technically put it into his hand. Like, again, he's just walked into the room and he's taken off his beret, but even then, that doesn't really hold it all that well. Having a look at the figure's articulation, this is where he becomes a bit limited. G.I. Joe's, back certainly in the day, it did have their fair share of articulation. Colonel O'Neill falls into that category of, we're just phoning it in. In other words, he does have only just the straight swivel back and forth on his head. He only has just a regular swivel on his arms. And he only has a straight out back and forth motions on his legs. And that's it. It's, again, a shame that he didn't actually have any other additional posability due to his size, due to the fact he's very bulky also in his torso, and due to the fact that he has very limited articulation. You can't quite pair these Stargate figures with some of your vintage G.I. Joe Real American Hero figures, because unfortunately this one will stand out a bit from the crowd. Overall, again, a nice looking vintage figure. Sort of, again, you have to kind of give it the pass because of the time period in which it would have come out. Toys weren't certainly superposable, super detailed back then. The whole idea with them is generally they jumped on board a movie when a movie first came out, and they, of course, tried to rush to market a lot of figures that kids would probably want to pick up. I don't honestly remember whether this line did successfully succeed in toy aisles. I feel like it didn't. It probably came and it went, and then Hasbro focused their efforts again onto the next movie property. And poor Stargate figures and Stargate vehicles and Stargate the property was all but just forgotten until, again, the Stargate series started up, and then we end up, of course, getting figures of those from, I think, the likes of, say, Diamond Select, who was running with those lines later on. Those figures were much bigger, much more detailed, and much more posable. Can't really say the same here for the poor Hasbro line, and certainly can't say that for the case here. It's okay there. It's okay there. Of Colonel Jack O'Neill. Of course, having a look at these retro figures also comes the charm in admiring the vintage packaging that would have come included with these figures as well. Stargate notably has one of the most awkward of packages, especially when some humbled reviewer years down the road decides he wants to review these. They're next to impossible to stand up. Illustrated on the front, as best they could come up with, a likeness to Kurt Russell. It's not bad. It's very cartoony, of course, and he's very broad in the torso, very large arms. Everything's kind of getting larger the closer it's getting to you. But you spin around to the back, and you can, of course, see the 8 figures, 4 good guys, and there were 4 bad guys. So it kind of evened things out nicely. The figures that always enticed me the most to this particular line of toys was specifically like the Ra, the horse, the Anubis, and the horse. Those were all the ones that I wanted to pick up. And we're going to maybe be having a look at those, I don't know, maybe down the road. Also included in this line was a short run of vehicles, a winged glider, an all-terrain cruiser, which does bear some striking resemblance to a G.I. Joe vehicle that we also got as well. This was certainly back in the day where companies wanted to make the most of their molds, so it was pretty common to see vehicles carry their way over. The Street Fighter vehicles, for example, made a lot of remolds from the original G.I. Joe vehicles. Also with this particular line, you have a triangular cutout card. Gone away are the rectangular cards that came with G.I. Joes. Of course, now we're going the route of triangles. The triangles not only serve to give you a read-up of O'Neill, but also you can cut these out and you can collect the bio cards to form Stargate pyramids, which was kind of really interesting for the time. Then down below, or to the side there, you can collect all 8 figure cards to complete the hieroglyphic alphabet, used to decode and create hieroglyphic messages. So there's a lot of stuff to really admire from this particular line, though short-run, yes. Came out in 1994, and quick as a hiccup, it was gone again. Pulling from the cobwebs that seems my memories at times, I vaguely remember going to see this movie. It came out early 90s, so I would have either been finishing up junior high or just starting out the nervousness of starting out high school. Dun dun dun! But I do remember seeing the movie and walking out of the theater, finding myself having enjoyed it. Though I wasn't in the mindset then, at the age I was, to be going to a toy store and checking out to see if there were figures based on O'Neill, that wasn't the case. No, in high school, I was trying to look cool, I was trying to listen to cool music, and I was wanting to see cool movies. I wasn't picking up toys. So I don't know if maybe the kids at the time frame of the early 90s were interested in picking up Stargate figures, but needless to say, I don't remember this line staying very long in stores. While I wasn't collecting toys, I may have maybe found myself going down the occasional toy aisles in my high school days. But again, I don't remember this line really being around for very long. Probably one of the reasonings why you probably can find these ones, unlike vintage G.I. Joes and some of the other popular toy brands of the 80s. These early 90 figures are sort of a sweet spot to start getting into collecting, primarily because you can go to places like eBay or even toy conventions and probably find these for a steal. In fact, though I didn't get these for a steal, stealing is wrong, I did, however, find a whole bunch of these over on eBay a long time ago, and I want to say I paid probably about $30 for all of them sealed. Well, most of them all sealed. So if you are certainly a big fan of the Stargate film, liked the figures, and maybe didn't even really know the figure line existed, maybe we will be having a look at more of these in some upcoming retro videos. Did you manage to collect this line as a child, or maybe later on into your years as an adult you went back and collected this line for yourself? Let me know down below what you guys think of the toy line, or based on this review and this review alone. As I did say, we are going to be having a look at some new stuff. Of course, that's never going to change on this channel, but I do admit that periodically I do find myself wanting to cover more retro figures from time and time again, and from different films and TV shows. So you never know, maybe I will still be pulling these out of the vintage closet, the closet that has the spider webs, the little spiders crawling down. My closet actually doesn't look like that. I'm just playing up a scenario. I'm trying to paint it better than what it actually is. But no, periodically I might find myself doing some retro reviews from time and time again. So if you guys sort of loved and grew up with these old vintage lines, stay tuned to this channel, my friends, because there's going to be a lot of videos coming your way. If you are new to this channel, digging the guy's content, this guy's content, my content, would you consider hitting that subscribe button down below? Would you consider hitting that bell notification? And would you consider keeping those vintage eyes peeled on this channel for future videos, as there's always new videos coming your way? As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.